Greetings fellow Gorehounds and welcome back to another Blood Splattered vlog. As you can see, I still have a ton of people staying over at this particular apartment, so I am filming in the garage yet again. And the movie I'm going to talk about this week is none other than the Irish supernatural psychological horror thriller, Nails. And when it comes to Irish horror cinema, I'm actually a really big fan of Let Us Pray, Grabbers, and Stitches. And when I was skimming through Netflix, I saw this movie Nails that happened to have one of the stars from Stitches in the movie. And then when looking up the movie, I found out it was an Irish horror film, and I'm like, well, I like those, I should check this out. But unfortunately, unlike those other three films, I did not like Nails. And there's a variety of reasons why I didn't like Nails, but the main reason is because I felt like the movie didn't culminate in anything worthwhile. But I'll talk more about that later. First, let's talk about the things I did like about Nails. Number one, I love the premise of this movie. It's basically about this girl who gets crippled in a car accident, and because she was crippled in the car accident, she's basically stuck in a bed in a hospital, unable to move or speak. She's being terrorized by this supernatural entity, or maybe a psychological entity, named Nails, which is this pale, creepy ghost creature with this fucked up mouth and these really long fingernails. And it seems oddly obsessed with fucking with her equipment that's keeping her alive so she can't breathe. And I thought that was a legitimately creepy premise with a lot of promise. It's basically Johnny Got His Gun with a monster. Which, for those of you who don't know, Johnny Got His Gun is an old school psychological horror story about a soldier that is completely crippled and can't speak or move or anything. But his brain still works, and so he's still cognizant of the fact that everything that's happening around him is awful and scary. And it's a classic anti-war story that's inspired everything from Metallica to clearly this movie. But this movie has nothing to do with war. This movie is basically, let's just take that premise of someone who can't move or speak, and let's add a monster to that mix to make it more of a mainstream style horror movie. And on the surface, I thought that was really cool, but the execution leaves a lot to be desired. It's a movie that doesn't seem to trust its own imagery to carry the creepiness forward, and so it overcompensates with its incredibly overbearing soundtrack, which is just a series of jarring music stings one after another. And believe you me, after a while, these stings stop being effective and start just being outright annoying. Like, there's legitimately creepy moments when she's just sitting there on the bed and the creepy thing is staring over her shoulder. And if you turn off the sound, the image alone is super fucking creepy, but with the sound, it's just frustrating. Which is really too bad, because for the most part, visually, this movie is really solidly constructed. Now, with all that being said, the actors in this movie actually all do a pretty solid job. I especially like the lead actress. I really found myself wanting to see her succeed in surviving against this creature. And that's mainly because she does a really good job of portraying the struggle of being someone who cannot speak or move, but is trying really hard to and trying to get everyone around her to understand that this thing she's seeing exists. And this movie has a really good use of the old Hitchcock mindset of the scariest thing being that no one actually believes you when something happens to you. And that thing is even scarier if you are actually physically incapable of protecting yourself in any way. And that's what I mean by this movie having a lot of promise, because everything about that 100% works. It's just when it got to all the scares themselves would have worked had they not done these annoying music stings. Though I will say there are a couple shots of the actual monster that did look extremely comical. And I couldn't tell if those particular moments were because of the framing or because of really bad CGI. In fact, I couldn't actually tell if there was CGI being used or if it was just bad makeup. Either way, there were a couple moments that made me unintentionally laugh. But the other thing I really like about this movie is the nurse that treats the main character. And the nurse is played by the same guy who played Stitches in the movie Stitches, and he is a legitimately entertaining character and one of the few characters in the whole movie that is a legitimately good person. And he tries his best to help her despite the fact that it's obvious he is not going to make it out of this movie at all. But I ain't gonna tell you here whether or not he does, because that is for the spoiler section. But man, the thing I really liked about this character is that of all the characters in the whole movie, he's the only one that has a true sense of humor about himself. With the exception of the main character, of course, who actually has a couple really good jokes at her own expense. But because both of these characters have a sense of humor, it humanizes both of them in a way that none of the other characters are. Everyone else in this movie takes themselves a little too seriously. Which is fine, it fits their characters, but it did mean I wasn't drawn to them the way I was these other two. And now I just kind of feel like I'm rambling about random stuff, so I should probably move on to the spoilers so I can talk about specifics. But needless to say, while I do not recommend Nails, it is currently available on Netflix if you do want to watch it. Be warned going in, despite having some legitimately creepy imagery, it is 100% a jump scare fest. And if you're anything like me, when you get to the end of the movie, you're gonna be really mad. Because I did not like the way this movie ended, and I thought it made the whole affair completely pointless. And with all that said, my fellow Gorehounds, I'm going to include some sort of Amazon affiliate link in the description below. And if you click that link and buy or rent something with that link, I will get a kickback from it. And good God, let's just finally move on to the spoilers, because I just want to get done with talking about this movie as fast as possible. Alrighty then, so our movie opens up with a prologue of a little girl in a hospital getting her nails clipped. And then after this prologue, we cut to our main character doing yoga and getting ready to do a run outside. But when she gets outside and does her run, she ends up getting hit by a car while crossing a crosswalk. Just BAM! Now she's crippled, holy shit! And Jesus, the way she gets hit by this car is fucking brutal. In fact, it's so brutal that it almost made me laugh. But not with the, oh my god, that is utterly hilarious kind of laughter, but with the, oh Jesus, that's fucked up kind of laughter. The kind of laughter that happens when something super messed up happens in your presence and you have no idea how to process it. And that immediately put me on good footings with the movie because I was like, oh man, that was super effective. And then after she's hit by the car, we cut to her in the hospital months later as she's starting to recover. Because naturally, after being hit by this car, she has this brief period where she's in a coma. And she's on such extreme life support that they actually have put a tube down her throat so she can breathe. And naturally, because of this tube, she cannot speak, and because of her injuries, she cannot move. Except for her finger, so they give her this really high-tech speak-and spell, essentially, which allows her to type her thoughts, and this extremely feminine robot voice will speak it for her. And I gotta say, I love the robot voice they give her in this movie because it's just all kinds of creepy, and totally adds to the overall dread of the movie. But then we get her first night alone in the hospital where she's actually conscious and not asleep. And unfortunately, she's very much aware that just out of the corner of her eye, there's this creepy thing just sitting there in the corner staring at her. And the shot of the creepy monster guy, Nails, is actually legitimately creepy and made me go, oh Jesus, look at that thing. But unfortunately, this is the first scary scene in the movie of many scary scenes in the movie that is completely and utterly ruined by its overbearing music stings. Just all of a sudden, while he's sitting there, you get this and because of this the entire mood of the scene just falls flat all of a sudden, and you're just sitting there going like, well, that was scary. And then she wakes up the next morning and tells her nurse everything she saw that night, or at least what she thought she saw, because it's not clear if she actually saw it. Because it turns out she might have severe brain damage as a result of being hit by the car, and on top of that, she's hopped up on all sorts of medications, so who knows if she's hallucinating or if something's there. And at the beginning, all signs are pointing to hallucination because, I mean, like, ghosts aren't real, right? And this is an area where I feel like the movie tips its hand a little too early. Because we're still in like the first 30 minutes of the movie, and her daughter comes to visit her in the hospital, and right away, the daughter can already see the ghosts, so the movie already tells us that yes, they're real. And I kind of wish the movie had dragged out that mystery just a little bit longer, because I really would have liked to have seen the character struggle a little more with whether or not what she's seeing was real. But I guess that would have made it way more of a psychological movie than an outright supernatural movie, so it would have been slightly different. But I don't know, it just felt like a real missed opportunity to me, like there is so much you could have done with that. But it wanted to be more of a mainstream horror movie instead of something actually interesting, so what can you do? So anyway, the rest of this movie follows this pattern. She has a spooky, creepy moment at night, wakes up, tells the hospital no one believes her, and then the husband shows up at the hospital and yells at the hospital to do something to help his wife. And at one point, to ease the main character's mind, they actually install cameras in her room, and they have the feed of the cameras wired to her laptop so she can see them. But this ends up complicating things even more because when she actually ends up capturing Nails on camera, no one else can see him in the camera feed but her. Which would have been a really effective moment if we hadn't known that the ghost was actually real, because then both she and we could be questioning whether or not she's crazy at this point. But because we know definitively that no, the ghost is real, this moment just falls flat. And that's what this movie keeps doing. It keeps having these really effective setups that just end up falling flat because of its really shitty execution. And it's so frustrating because this movie could be legitimately great, but it's just held back. And it's held back by itself, and it's just so tragic. Anyway, over the course of the movie, the main character ends up discovering that her actual hospital room that she's staying in was a room in which this male nurse years ago killed 5 children. And when she looks up the pictures of this male nurse, he looks identical to Nails, which she ends up calling this creature over the course of the movie, and I gotta say, the name Nails leaves a lot to be desired. It doesn't quite strike the fear in your heart that Freddy Krueger does, is all I'm saying. So okay, we now have the backstory, the main character now knows it's real for sure, even though we already knew that. But whatever, the movie's only 90 minutes, so if it wants to waste our time, then okay. And it's at this point in the movie when I started to get invested in the story yet again. Because the main character realizes that no one's gonna help her, not her husband, not the nurse, not the hospital. So she starts to take matters in her own hands. She starts to exercise so that she can move a little better than she could before. And she also starts turning off her assisted breathing so she could teach herself to breathe normally again, so that when the time comes, she can escape the hospital and get away from this monster. And I started to get legitimately invested in this character's survival. And this is the point in my review where I'm going to have to spoil the actual ending of this movie. So if there's any part of you, despite my review, that thinks they're going to watch this movie, then you should stop here right now and experience the ending for yourself. Because I can't talk about my most hated part of this movie without spoiling everything. Alrighty then, so here we go. The main character discovers that apparently she was a little girl in this hospital when the 5 children died. Hence, the prologue of the movie, the little girl getting her nails clipped, was this main character. And after a pretty effective scene in which the nurse is killed by nails, the nurse, which again was my favorite character in the whole movie, though there is a part of you when he dies that's sitting there going like, dude, run, come on. But anyway, he is killed by Nails, and after this scene, everyone shows up at the hospital, including her husband. And this is when Nails goes apeshit. He shuts off the power and just starts killing everybody. Kills the head of the hospital, kills the husband, and starts going after the main character and her daughter. And this leads to a final confrontation with the main character and Nails. And at this point, she has a choice. She could either escape with her daughter, or die. There's really no other alternative. And for some inexplicable reason, she chooses to sacrifice herself to the creature. But there's no reason to do this because her and her daughter could have gotten away without the sacrifice. So what gives? Is she gonna kill herself so she can turn into a ghost so she can kill the creature in the afterlife? No, that doesn't happen. She ends up getting killed by Nails in this hilariously over-the-top way. And then the police arrive and the daughter says that her mom was killed by Nails. And then we have this really pointless scene of her being in the video feed being treated by Nails. So she's now stuck in the hospital in the afterlife, and why? We went through all that for her to fight for her survival over the course of the movie only for her to give up for no reason? It would be one thing if she fought the creature because she had no other choice and lost. But she had a choice and there was no reason for it here. The entire movie was her building up the courage to fight for her life. So it just nullifies her entire journey for like a weird jump scare ending, which is so dumb. Which, yeah, the end of the movie beguiles you, because of course it does. Just, good God, give me an aspirin and call it a day. I'm done with this movie. This movie is just so bad. Anyway, my fellow gorehounds, be sure to like, comment, subscribe, and don't forget to ring that notification bell so that you're notified of my videos immediately upon their upload. And as always, peace out, and I'll catch y'all later, hopefully with a way better movie than Nails.